So one of the criticisms that I've seen thrown at Square Enix, and definitely do understand, is the criticism surrounding them releasing so many remakes and remasters. For me, it doesn't bother me, and I guess I'm a part of the problem since I buy all of these remakes and remasters. But now we're hearing about another remake that could be a pretty big deal and a pretty huge one, as we're hearing that Dragon Quest VII might be getting that remake treatment. Dragon Quest VII has been released multiple times now, first of course back in the day on the PS1, then brought up to the 3DS and all spruced up, and then it was also brought to mobile phones like iOS and Android. And clearly this remake would be a more grandiose one than the one that we got on the 3DS and mobile phones, unless it's just essentially the 3DS version of the game with some little tweaks around the edges and improvements just so they can bring it up to date and just improve it for the home consoles that it'll be releasing on. But based on an MP First article that we got regarding a leak of an internal form at Square Enix, I don't think that's going to be the case, and we're going to go over that in this video, and I want to talk about that. And also, before I do get into that, I do want to say it's also important to know that we are getting that Dragon Quest 1+2 remake on October 30th of 2025, so not too long from now. And in this article put out by MP First, they're saying Square Enix has multiple projects releasing prior to March 31st of 2026, or a little bit after that, early next year, tied to their top franchises. And I'm sure, as most of you can probably tell, that March 31st is the end of the fiscal year for Square Enix, so they're probably going to try to squeeze these games into this fiscal year if they can. But that does tell me that they might actually have some pretty big things lined up for the future if they're trying to squeeze this game into this fiscal year, or if they're just doing all these remakes and remasters now to try and hold people over until those bigger games release. No? Because we have the Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D remake that released in November of 2024, the Bravely Default Flying Fairy remaster that released this past June along with the Nintendo Switch 2, the Final Fantasy Tactics Ivalice Chronicles remaster in September, then the Dragon Quest 1+2 HD 2D remake in October of this year, then this rumored Dragon Quest 7 remake, and possibly the Final Fantasy 9 remake that we're not even sure is even still real or not and even still happening. And like I said in the intro, it seems that it's not just going to be a port of the 3DS version, and it seems like a lot is going into this, as if we look at this MP First article that I'm referencing and I've been talking about in this video, it says that while the full scale of the remake remains unknown at this point, the fact that the company itself still refers to it as a remake and not a remaster speaks volumes. Square Enix typically reserves the terminology for projects involving significant changes, whether in visuals, gameplay, or structure, rather than a one-to-one port with visual polish. The article also goes on to say, fans will recall that Dragon Quest VII was later re-released on the Nintendo 3DS with updated visuals and various improvements, and was generally well received. However, the version currently in development appears to go well beyond that effort. Now, we know that Square is currently cooking up Kingdom Hearts 4 behind the scenes. They also have the Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3, and we could even see something like a new Nier game. It's been a while since we got the last Nier game, Nier Automata, so it feels like they're honestly like, let's just put out a lot of high quality remasters and remakes for the time being to hold them over while we're cooking up everything else. But this article definitely has me curious as to what else is coming down the pipeline and how soon we could even hear it announced, because if they're planning on releasing one or multiple projects, whether that's including the Dragon Quest VII remake or other ones, whatever, in their top franchises, then when are we going to hear about these games and when are they going to release? Because this obviously doesn't say that they're definitively coming out prior to March 31st, but you would think if they're targeting this fiscal year or early next fiscal year that we're going to be hearing about these games soon. Opening Night Live and Tokyo Game Show are obviously the most probable, places that we would see announcements like these. And I wanted to come back and actually add this in because while I was editing, Nate the Hate released their podcast. And on the podcast, Nate said that there is actually a Nintendo Direct that will be happening in July after the release of Donkey Kong Bonanza. So that's another place that we could be hearing about any of these remakes, including whether it's one of the Final Fantasy ones or, of course, the Dragon Quest VII remake that we're talking about in this video. And honestly, I personally love the fact that FF Tactics Ivalice Chronicles is just like a 3-ish month turnaround, as we went from June with Summer Games Fest to now September that we're going to be getting that game. But you would think if this Dragon Quest VII remake has so much work going into it, to the fact that they're going to classify it as a remake rather than a remaster, that they would want to build up some hype around this and try to get this thing as much possible attention as they can. Because I mean, I'm sure that I wouldn't even say I'm sure, I would say it's almost a definite that they're going to need more of a return on investment for a huge, or not even just a bigger remake like this than they would for Ivalice Chronicles, where they have the luxury with Ivalice Chronicles of saying, okay, we can do a little 3-ish, 4-ish month turnaround and we'll be good. There wasn't a whole lot of money that got sunken into this, but if this is a lot of time and money and investment going into it, then you would think they'd want a sizable amount of time, or just a good amount of time for hype for this game. Now, according to this leaked document, the Dragon Quest VII Remake is one of the final titles slated for release in this internal roadmap. The current plan is for the game to launch in the last quarter of the current fiscal year or at the beginning of the next, meaning the plan is to launch in early 2026 at the earliest, as of course Square Enix's current fiscal year ends in March of 2026, if things remain on track. Now, this positions it as a potential major closing title for Square Enix's fiscal calendar, or an early tentpole for the next. So Square honestly has some pretty ambitious plans, in my opinion, going on behind the scenes if they just keep pushing out and releasing so many of these remakes. And not that these remakes aren't high quality or a big deal, but it's just the fact that we're getting so many remakes and not too many new titles or new entries, or just as much as you would think, as it just, Square is just pushing out remake after remake after remake, as I pointed out. As like I said, these remakes are high quality, but like, fans really want new titles in these series, as while they're beloved, we're still waiting on a game like Dragon Quest XII that we heard about in 2021. The fact that Dragon Quest XII was revealed all the way back 4 years ago now has me wondering if we're going to see this in 2026 also, or if that doesn't get released until 2027 or 2028. But Square also has Kingdom Hearts 4 releasing sometime soon. It feels like we never hear about that game, but I mean, we know it's coming out at some point, just as we've seen, you know, those recent screenshots that came out, I guess it was a couple months ago in May or June. And that leaves me wondering how they're going to space out all of these games if you include Dragon Quest XII, FF7 Remake, and Kingdom Hearts 4. Because from everything we've heard, Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 is on schedule to be released in 2027. And Kingdom Hearts 4 has obviously been in the oven for a very long time. It's been a long time we've been waiting for that ever since it got announced or whatever. So it's like, you know that there's a pretty good possibility that we could see 2 of those 3 games possibly release in the same fiscal year or calendar year for Square. And that could be Kingdom Hearts 4 and Dragon Quest XII possibly both releasing together in the same year, or maybe we get one of those 2 and then the other slips into 2027 along with Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3. And if that isn't the case, then oh boy, because I don't think anybody wants to wait until 2028 for either. And knowing the bad luck that Kingdom Hearts 4 has had, I'm sure it would be some bad luck like that would get pushed into 2028. But realistically, I would say probably Dragon Quest XII would be the one that gets pushed into 2028 if that is the case. I'm hoping it's not though. But who really knows at this point, because everything with Square recently has been leaks, rumors, and remakes. Now, with PlayStation, Sega, and Square all confirmed to be at Tokyo Game Show in September, as VGC reported it, this is going to be a huge trade show this year. Now, what will we see? I'm not sure, but I think there's definitely a huge possibility that we could see one or multiple of the remakes that we touched on and talked about at this trade show this year. Now, veteran Final Fantasy director Momotomo Toriyama actually spoke on the fact that we could possibly see FF7 Remake Part 3 at Tokyo Game Show, as last September Famitsu interviewed Toriyama about Final Fantasy Ever Crisis, and Toriyama said this: "Although we just celebrated the first anniversary and the planning team is already talking about the second anniversary, we are considering various things such as what the next motive should be. We hope that you enjoy the next anniversary, and by that time, information about the next work of FF7 Remake project may start to come out, so we hope that you will get excited together." Tokyo Game Show is, of course, like I said, at the end of September, which is a little bit after the second anniversary of Ever Crisis. So yeah, that does pretty much line up for us to possibly be hearing about FF7 Remake Part 3. And a lot of people have been arguing back and forth about whether or not we'll actually be seeing anything about FF7 Remake Part 3 in September or at Tokyo Game Show. And a lot of people were coming for Final Fantasy creator Dashing David, and just the fact that he said that he believes that we could possibly see this game in September, whether that's at Tokyo Game Show or not. And I kind of had to reply to David, because I do agree with David that I think, yeah, there's going to be something possibly at Tokyo Game Show for FF7 Remake Part 3, and I think there's just factors that a lot of people aren't thinking about. I responded to David's post or tweet saying they showed Rebirth off a little over 2 years after Remake released, and did so even after having to make the intermission DLC and the integrated version of Remake while developing Rebirth. 100% realistic to think that we see Part 3 reveal in September, since Part 3 is their sole focus now. I stand by that, and I do think there's a very legitimate possibility that we see more about Part 3 later on this year at Tokyo Game Show. And if not, then I would at least hope that we see something about FF9 Remake, because I'm just hoping that's still happening. But at the end of the day, whether or not you're a fan of these Square Enix remakes and what they've been putting out with these games, we're going to be getting more remakes / remasters. So at the end of the day, you got to get ready for it and buckle up if you're not a fan, because we're going to be getting these for sure. A Dragon Quest VII remake would be exciting, and I'm excited to see more about it, especially with how much we hear from this leak that they're putting into it. But I am very optimistic and excited to see what Square has planned for 2026 and 2027, just based on what has been confirmed actually from them, and then just the leaks and everything that we've heard so far over the last couple years, or just even the last couple months and weeks now. I want to know down below in the comments section if you're excited or not about Square releasing all these remakes, or just what you want to see from Square in the near future in terms of just any game, remake, remaster, or not. If you liked the video though, then I'd really appreciate if you can give it a like, as it helps me out a lot. And if you're new to the channel or returning to the channel and not subscribed, then make sure to hit that subscribe button, as I have a lot of fun JRPG content planned, and even some non-JRPG content planned also. Thank you all so much for watching though, and I am out. Peace.